Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest installment of the Football Experience, brought to you by On the Pod. I'm Caleb. He's Nev. Nev, how you doing?
Pretty good today, man. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. And it's that time of the season. We have our European finalists. We have a Champions League finalist, and we had another set of we had back-to-back second legs that were really exciting to watch. And I guess we're gonna start at the Bernabeu. Um, and my question to you about this game that we just witnessed was: do you think this game can be analysed and over-analysed after what we've seen? And do you think too many conclusions can be drawn about either of these teams after what we witnessed?
The simple answer, I think, and like the really short answer is no. I didn't see. I saw what you'd expect from Real Madrid, but I saw a below par City, and I want to use an analogy from esports. And I know that I'm pretty familiar with it. Like I watch Counter Strike and League of Legends, and I don't see it as much in actual sports, but I see it a lot in esports, especially in the deeper you go into the tournaments, or even in the early stages, but especially more in the deeper end in the quarters and the semis, where teams sort of hide their tactics, and it ends up and they don't show their full true potential because they want to show those tactics for the final because they are the favorite. And it sort of seemed like City were doing that. Like they weren't given instructions to fully express themselves and to fully take the game by the scruff of the neck, because they wanted to show what they're truly capable of in the final, because they were the favourites to go through. And that's what it seemed like to me. I don't think it was anything really that Real Madrid did to stifle City from not playing their game. And obviously, we saw Real Madrid's pretty much do a Man United 99 final, where they scored two goals in the last last 2-3 minutes of the game, essentially, or within 2 or 3 minutes of each other, to take it to extra time and to ultimately win it. And I've seen a lot of people come out and criticize Guardiola for his substitutions, but they're quick to forget that the substitutions that he did make, where I think Gundogan came on for De Bruyne, he was the one that, like him and Zinchenko, were the ones that were instrumental in the build-up to City's goal. Maybe the substitution of Mahrez could be criticised, perhaps. I'm not sure why Sterling was brought on, because Sterling is the type of player that likes to run in behind defences. And considering that they're playing with a low block, I thought that was a wasteful substitution. But I don't know, if you look at the bench, who do you really bring on? You can't bring De Bruyne back on. Can't bring Mahrez back on. So it was... I can't really put any sort of description on it other than what I've said, that I think City, it seemed to me like City were hiding something for the final.
Good. I'm glad you finished on that, because you started talking about the game, and I want to go into the game in a little bit. But what you're talking about, Guardiola, and I've never thought of this. This is a really interesting theory that you've just proposed here. So you're saying that Pep Guardiola did not want to reveal his hand all in the build-up to the Champions League final, which he expected to be against Liverpool. Is that what you're saying?
That's what it seemed like to me, because like I said, I didn't see anything new from Real Madrid. I didn't see Carlo Ancelotti set the team up in any sort of way to stifle Madrid. And I know we will touch on the other game later, but like in the first half of the other semi-final, you saw Villarreal stifle Liverpool. I didn't see that from Real Madrid.
No, I like that's a really interesting story. I don't know how much truth there can be to it because I guess when we go into the game, there might be little differences that I noticed rather than um, what you're saying maybe in what happened in the game. But just if you think about Guardiola and the way you would perceive him to think from the outside, obviously none of us know exactly what he thinks, but that Champions League has to be the holy grail. And as you go through the theory, I think the way he's built it up, the rivalry with Liverpool, the way the draw fell, that especially once you got to the semi-finals, that it would most likely be Liverpool on the other side, and Man City were perceived to be the better team than Real Madrid, and I think that played out as well. To be fair, um, but and the one that I want to add on to your that might give your theory even more weight is the FA Cup semi final, where he was in direct competition against that opponent and he fielded a weaker side. So he definitely didn't want them to, I know there was a few injuries and whatnot going into that game, but that was definitely a weaker side, and we said it at the time. It looked like he was prioritizing heavily, obviously, whereas Liverpool looked like they were just going for the lot. So I don't know. When I throw that in to what you've already said, it's just a fascinating thing to think about.
But also, like they've played each other already twice in the space of a month and a half, and they would have played each other in the I think in the space of a month and a half. If Man City got to the final, this would have been their third game in a month and a half. So that's another thing to add on to it. Like they're so familiar with each other, especially in this recent time span. Because the last time they saw each other was was it November last year that they saw each other. So considering that they've already seen each other twice now before a potential final in the Champions League, that again adds a little bit more weight to the theory.
So it's interesting. We've almost done we've done a full 360, but we've arrived with a different point in that we always we always criticize, or we have in recent years, Guardiola for overthinking these games. I think in the game itself, he didn't overthink it. But now now we got this. I don't know. Like I say, I don't know how true it is, but you've put out this theory that I'm kind of running with now, where now could he be criticized for overthinking the path and overthinking the final opponent and literally overthinking, like not thinking over Real Madrid? Um, Look, let's go into the game because I think if you look at the way the game played out, I think that's the thing that goes against this theory because I thought while Man City were not playing well, Real Madrid weren't playing well. They did not have a shot on target, I believe, until they scored the goal. So Man City were incredibly comfortable in this game. Incredibly comfortable. The goal pretty much to me signified the end of the tie, and I even started going on my phone a little bit while the game was going on because City were just clearly in control. And it's funny as well because you talk about the substitutes. Well, I thought at the time you talk about the impact they made. They did make a good impact because after the goal as well, Man City were on top after the goal. And all the way up until Real Madrid got that ball into the box finally, City were in utter control and they were cruising to the final because it wasn't like after the goal, Real Madrid had this sudden burst, a little bit like they did against Chelsea in that second leg. After Modric's pass, it was like a little shockwave went through the team and they burst into life. Real Madrid didn't burst into life after City scored. That was City's best moment in the game. Guardiola said it after the game, I believe, and that was those 15, 20 minutes after the goal were probably City's best moment in the game. So these two goals literally came from nowhere. And you talk about it, and I haven't seen, and it's a great point by you to bring up the 99 final. Fantastic on that one. But I haven't seen the whole game, so I don't know how those got. I don't know if United were putting pressure, putting a lot of balls into the box for 10 minutes before that happened. I'm not 100% sure. The only one that I can think of that this comes close to in terms of where the hell did that come from was Liverpool in '05 against AC, because AC were absolutely dominating Liverpool, playing them off the park, more so than what City were, and it was 3 goals as well. Let's not forget in a final, but in 6 minutes, it just it all changed from absolutely nowhere. It's not like Liverpool came out the second half and they started dominating. The first 10 minutes were more even. Liverpool came out with a bit more urgency. They changed formation, but then these three just goals out of nowhere, these gifts, just come out of the sky. That's exactly what happened for Real Madrid. And it's funny if you contrast the clubs that obviously they're the clubs with a lot of European pedigree. So if you want to run with, and it's hard to ignore the narrative now, which is something I want to touch on a little bit later as well. But you can't ignore the narrative that this is written in the stars, because the way that game was going, Man City were cruising, and I guess in summary, I'll try to say, um, in relation to the initial question I asked you, I don't think this game you can draw too many conclusions in terms of, oh, well, what was Pep thinking? What happened there? Like, I don't think Guardiola could be criticised for this, because this just came out of nowhere. I don't know if you agree with that, or if you have a few criticisms that you want to level at him.
No, I think it definitely came out of nowhere. Like you said, Man City seemed like they were cruising. The perhaps like those two, like the two Grealish chances as well. Like you had the goal line clearance, and then you had Courtois saving it literally with his studs to like touching it with his studs to divert the ball enough past the far post. Like you're talking centimeters here, possibly even millimeters between City going through and Real going through, and yeah, that even the first goal came out of nowhere, like let alone the second one as well, and then the third one, like I've heard Ferdinand and I think Lescott as well talk about it, and they said that was just lack of concentration / stupidity or whatever it was, like where Benzema's going nowhere with the ball and he goes in for a rash challenge instead of like trying to jockey him out into the path that he's going anyway, because he wasn't on goal. He was going like he was heading towards the corner flag. But yeah, like you said, it pretty much came out of nowhere. I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I did want to ask you, should Casemiro have been sent off in the first half?
That's impossible for us to say. I had it written down in my notes
Yeah.
that both those challenges were definitely yellow card challenges.
Yep. 100%.
But then the old adage is, but if he gets the first one, does he even make the second tackle?
Well,
So sent off, it's hard to say. But
he didn't get
he
either yellow card.
No, and that was where the ref got it completely wrong. I mean, after the first one, the scissor challenge, Casemiro is a player, when you watch him, he does this so often in games. He puts in these challenges that you watch it live and it's like, it's a yellow card challenge, and then he gets away. And by the end of the game, you look at his name in the lineup, and like if you go on Google or whatever, and he doesn't have a yellow card next to his name, and you're like, how the hell has that happened? Because that guy, he does it every game I watch, it seems.
Yeah, that like the whole like stats thing that you mentioned. Like I had to look after. I'm like, yeah, surely he finished with a yellow card, and nah, he didn't get a yellow card at all. Like Modric got a yellow card for being pushed in the face. He got he
That was
he.
ridiculous.
I think Modric just like sort of hid his hand away. I don't think he even like shoved him, but like, and he's the one that got pushed in the face. So, yeah.
No, that one was absolutely ridiculous. Um, yeah, so you don't have any criticisms for Guardiola, really, even in the bigger
Not
picture.
not really, like, because as we've touched on it, like the subs that he made, they did make an impact, and like the subs that he made that led to Mahrez's goal. That's that's the facts of it. Maybe Fernandinho, he came on for Rodri, didn't he? Um, so I'm pretty sure he came on for Rodri. So maybe that one, like taking Rodri off for Fernandinho, who's obviously going to be slower, and um, yeah, but like even bringing De Bruyne off, like that's a little bit of a weird one for me as well, because like he is the best player in your team, potentially the potentially the best midfielder, if not like the second best midfielder behind Modric for me in the world. Like I don't know what other midfielders you would put ahead of him, but like to bring him off, that's it's a little bit of a weird one. Even though uh, Gundogan did, I'm pretty sure he assisted the goal. Um, so yeah, that's like you can't criticize the subs too much, to be honest.
Nah, and I think what I've heard that De Bruyne is playing through painkillers week in week out now. I've heard that he's not. He's
Well,
he's playing through injury.
well, that makes sense.
So that yeah, that obviously comes into thinking, and obviously, and as well, you look at the game, and the game did feel and look over. It was done. Like bringing off De Bruyne was not a big deal at that time. It's always, and I guess probably if he's playing through injury, that tipped Guardiola's mind to bring him off, because it's always such a dangerous one to bring off your best player with the with extra time a possibility, and obviously with no away goals is a huge possibility now. Um, I don't know if I don't know. I'm torn between should we have a rule change where if the game goes into extra time, you can recycle a substitute, because I just think the game would be so much richer for having Kevin De Bruyne back in that extra 30-minute period. But at the same time, I like that the manager really has to think about their decision, and their decision sort of is final. It has to be that way if you're going to decide one way or the other. But in terms of the spectacle, I think we'd all prefer to have Kevin De Bruyne out there where the stakes are at their highest in that extra 30 minutes. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
The recycling of players could be an interesting one, but like we've played amateur football, and you know when you've like after a game or even after you've come off, the lactic acid just sets in and you feel absolutely destroyed. And like especially like even late a couple of hours later when you get home and everything, you can barely walk. You want to just like lay down on the couch the whole day. Like you maybe also that could like the whole sports science thing could factor into that, where if a player's already like been sitting down, he's rested for like those 30-40 minutes since he's come off, will you still get that same performance, or will you risk, or is he at a higher risk of injury because of like cooling down and everything? So that's one thing to consider. Like if any physios or sports science people know much about that, then they can obviously say whether there's actually some merit to that argument. But I'm also looking at the benches now, and besides the player, like Man City had no one to bring on other than what he brought on. Like you have Ake who didn't come on, Stefan who's a goalkeeper, Scott Carson, Egan Riley, Cole Palmer, James McAfee, and Romeo Lavia. There's no big names there. Whereas like with Real Madrid's bench, Alaba didn't come on. and Jovic hasn't really had a big standout season, but like Carlo Ancelotti pretty much brought on all his big names, but it seems like their bench is a little bit stronger than City. But yeah, City didn't have anyone to come on, and I've already criticised the Sterling substitute. Who else would you have brought on to play against a low block? Because Sterling doesn't suit playing against a low block, in my opinion.
Well, now that you're on this point, I think now we've hit a bigger picture criticism that we can have of Man City and Guardiola was squad depth the reason they weren't able to win this tie ultimately. Because if you look at the game as well, in the moments where they were comfortable, and obviously this is no one's fault. Kyle Walker gets injured at the Wanda, um, and just touching on that game at the Wanda as well. We spoke about it. I think the last pod we were reviewing or previewing this, in fact, where Man City had already gone to Madrid and tried to win this way. You know, they did it at the Wanda. They went up against Atletico, and they held on to a 1-goal lead from the home leg. And for the most part, that's exactly what it felt like they tried to do at the Bernabeu. They weren't going to go toe to toe with Real Madrid. They weren't going to try and outplay Real Madrid off the park, which I think probably in hindsight you should have done, especially judging by the first leg and especially judging by the fact that you now have Kyle Walker back, who, if you want to go a bit more gung ho, you can, because you can step higher up the park. Because we saw it in the first half, he was eating up every Vinicius run, and again we were offered a nice contrast, like with the Fernandinho assist and then the Fernandinho mistake last week. We were offered a nice contrast to what the game at the Etihad would have looked like if Vinicius got in behind from the halfway line. Because there was one where he was even in his own half and Walker still caught him, but there was one where he got in behind for about halfway and Walker just ate him up. I think that might have been the slide tackle challenge out for a corner. So that made City really comfortable in the game and probably gave them a good platform that if they wanted to take the game to a bit more. But it looked like they just wanted to do, like you say, maybe hide something. But I guess touching on that point about the squad depth, in the first leg, we saw Stones had to start there, and he was injured when he was playing, so he came off, and then Fernandinho had to play there, and we've copped a goal from that side in that game, which obviously, they finished tied, so any goal that isn't conceded therefore becomes very relevant to whether they could go through. So, and you shouldn't really be having this criticism for Man City when they can spend the money that they do, to not have adequate cover in those positions when the time comes. I just don't think for a club with that much financial power and that much clout, how can you leave your squad so threadbare in those positions? Because if it's not Walker and Cancelo, the downgrades are considerable.
Well, what were the signings in the summer anyway? They brought in Grealish for 100
Grealish.
mil. Is that it? Because that's it, isn't it? Besides maybe some like 18-year-olds that they might have brought into like their academy or like their reserves team. They didn't. Grealish was their only signing, wasn't he? Like their only senior signing. And while we're still on squad depth, Fernandinho's, is he retiring or is he just leaving on a free at the end of the season and going back to Brazil? And like obviously like Aguero left last season. Did David Silva leave last season or the season before?
Not sure. I think it was the season before.
Yeah. So, and he, in a way, he was replaced like by Foden, because Foden was coming in and like he's become a mainstay. But was he really replaced? Obviously, Aguero wasn't replaced, but like City have, it seems to me, like a little bit of a reinforcement on their hands this summer, where they need to go out and buy 4 or 5 players, and you've already got the apparent confirmation that Haaland is like all but signed for them, so that's the Aguero replacement. But even then, like you're with that, apparently Jesus is leaving at the end of the season. Like apparently he might be heading to Arsenal, and obviously we'll do a deeper dive into transfers at the end of the season. But like since we're on this topic of I guess like reinforcement, like you're bringing in one striker to replace Aguero 1 year late, but then you're letting your other striker that was originally brought in as like a long-term replacement for Aguero go. You're potentially letting him go. So they need to bring in two strikers, not just Haaland. Because if Haaland gets injured, and he was being injured for most of this season, and it could be one of those sort of niggling, reoccurring injuries. So who knows how much he'll play next season as well, especially in the Premier League, which is much more physical and demanding than the Bundesliga.
I wouldn't say much more. I mean, the Bundesliga is probably the closest thing you have to the Premier League on the continent. The football's very direct and very physical in the Bundesliga as well.
I think with the
Maybe a little bit
fixture,
more.
with the fixture congestion though, like
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do have 4 less games in the Bundesliga, I believe. So,
but not just
and you
that.
get that winter break.
Yeah, I think they get like 4 weeks. So 4 weeks
But
off.
obviously, that doesn't mean anything for next season because of the World Cup. So that gets in the way of all of that. But yeah, Haaland's young and he looks to be built like a machine. So it's pure speculation on how his body's gonna cope. I think he'll be just fine. I mean, if there's a player built for the Premier League, it's got to be that guy, surely. And I think that's a good point. Before we kind of move away from Man City and look at Real Madrid a little bit more, I think, and it's easy to say this now, looking at the chances, but if Man City have a striker, I mean, who beats them? Who beats them if they have a striker who puts away 2 of those chances that they've created over 180 minutes? Because ultimately, we can talk about squad depth and all of that, and that's played a part. But the fact that they didn't get a striker in the summer, I think, has ultimately cost them in this situation. And if you want to level another criticism at Guardiola, and I believe we've somewhat done it on this pod, it is that Guardiola doesn't want to work with the characters. He wants to be the main man. He wants to be I wouldn't say the star of the show that like implies that he's selfish or whatever, but he is the main man. And it's all about his system and his football at the club. It's not about your star man. It's not about the way that Carlo Ancelotti does it, and he makes it all about the players. Like Karim Benzema is obviously showing, and Luka Modric is showing. Guardiola doesn't have those characters, and a really interesting thing, and they said it on one of the pods I listened to. Ruben Diaz is only 24 years old, and if you ask for the leader in that Man City team, you'd say it's him. But the kid, I couldn't believe it when I heard that. I'm like, that guy's only 24 years old, and I mean, if that's your main leader, and I'm not saying that he doesn't have the ability to be Man City's main leader, but he's still a kid. I mean, for all intents and purposes, to get to a Champions League final, he is still so young in his developments, and you're asking him to be the leader and him to sort of be the one that everyone looks to in that time. Who is the one that everyone looks to? I mean, Real Madrid, you all look at Benzema. It's straight away. I mean, Liverpool, you all look if you're under pressure, you look at Van Dijk. If you need goals, you look at Salah or Mane. But Man City, I don't know who you turn to in those moments. So while I think what happened was freakish, I think Guardiola, if he had a moment of introspection, and I don't think he's ever going to change it, but if he did, I think he should be a little bit more willing to bring in those characters who see you through those moments.
It's a good point that you bring up with like Ruben Diaz, because wasn't he wearing the armband as well, like over De Bruyne? So
I think De Bruyne had it, and then obviously De Bruyne got substituted. So when everything fell apart, Diaz was the captain.
I thought Diaz, no, because Gundogan takes, he's the captain when.
Oh yeah, no, you're right.
I'm pretty
Gundogan
sure
did take
Diaz.
it.
I'm pretty sure Diaz had the captain's armband. So, and yeah, like that I thought he was a little bit older as well, but yeah, only 24. Like he's pretty much just coming out of that sort of youth player into the first team 3-4 year period. Like, if you get what I'm saying with that.
Yeah,
And now he's only like coming into, I guess, his prime years and stepping into that leadership role. But yeah, that was a little bit of a weird one that I think I spotted where Diaz had the armband over De Bruyne. And yeah, like you mentioned, like Real Madrid, uh, they have leaders like with Benzema and Modric and Cruz and Casemiro as well. And one thing I'll also mention is like I heard Thierry Henry say that Courtois is a better goalkeeper than Edison, and with some of the saves that he
yeah,
made, there's
yeah.
an argument there to be made. Obviously, he's not as good with the feet, but in terms of shot stopping ability, he's
No,
obviously up there with the best.
honestly, the more I watch Edison, the less faith I have in his goalkeeping ability. I think he's quite comfortably the best ball playing goalkeeper, maybe of all time. Obviously, I haven't seen every goalkeeper of all time, but if you think back in the day that they weren't trained to really do this, you'd have to think this guy who, I mean, he was making me laugh just watching it because when he picks up the ball and he just effortlessly pings a 70-yard ball, I'm just like, how does that look so effortless? I reckon if he really wanted to, he could go on the full from one box to the other from a kick off the ground. I can't believe a player can strike, and I'll say a player, not just a goalkeeper, a player can strike a ball like he does. It's absolutely incredible to watch. But that goal that got Real Madrid back into the game, it was so half-assed. You'd think he's got to be diving at the feet. You think he's got to be smothering that ball, and he's just trying to sort of flap it away. It was terrible goalkeeping, and I think it's been a little bit overlooked. To be quite, it's kind of overlooked in the same way that Edin Dzeko's goal in the stoppage time of Man City against QPR, before the Aguero moment. It's kind of overlooked in that same way. It's just like Edison's got to do better in that situation. This is a goalkeeper that many tout as the best in the world. The more I watch him, the actual goalkeeping aspect, it's left me questioning how good he really is as a goalkeeper. And I think if you contrast it to Allison, I don't think there's any contrast in that aspect. Now it just becomes a question: how much do you value the play with his feet?
Well, I think he's so crucial to the way that Pep wants to play that
Yeah,
even if he is, you know, an 8 or even a 9, like a 9 or 8 out of 10 shot stopper, like in terms of ability, instead of a 10 out of 10 like a Courtois or an Allison or even a Neuer, I suppose. But Neuer's obviously towards the tail end of his career. Um, I think Pep obviously still keeps him, but like we've seen, who was it? The goalkeeper that came from Barcelona um, to City when Pep first came in.
bravo.
Bravo. Like he but it was weird because at Barca he was actually pretty good with his feet and shot stopping, but I don't know whether it was confidence or language, but he didn't seem the same goalkeeper at City. But you saw Pep replace him pretty much straight away. But he was brought in as that sort of keeper that can play out from the back, and he was immediately replaced because he just wasn't up to the standard, even though his shot stopping was probably still at a decent level. But Pep obviously rates that higher than actual shot stopping ability, it seems.
Yeah, definitely. It's pivotal, to the way Guardiola teams play. I think it's time to move off City. I think we've got into depth how we probably think that it's just a fluke occurrence, but at the same time, you can have a moment where you look back and you think, could the squad have been deeper? Could we have had more characters for that moment? So, especially when you're dealing in such fine margins as a Champions League semi-final against the 13 times winners of the competition. Um, another little point. While I was watching the game, when the collapse was happening, I asked myself, was I watching PSG? Because it felt very PSG like, and I know Real Madrid have already done that to PSG, but it just felt like a club that didn't have the heritage and didn't have the footballing gods on their side, like the club that they were playing in the all white kits. And that's a perfect transition for us to move on to the first, or the second half, as it turned out, but first game we're talking about, second half of the finalists in Real Madrid. And I tell you what, they must have the board of directors for like the footballing gods must be half made up of Real Madrid legends. I mean, you've definitely got Di Stefano and Puskás up there pulling some strings from up in the clouds, because this is just the most incredible run to a final I've ever seen. I mean, back to back to back, incredible, unbelievable comebacks or unbelievable moments, all the way to the final, and going through the quality of opposition that they did in PSG, Chelsea, and now Man City to get to the final. And now they've, what many will say, they've now maybe got to play the ultimate boss in Liverpool at the end of it. But you've got to be worried, if you're a Liverpool supporter, that this is just all written in the stars, because you'd think it too. You wouldn't think it could happen again, but probably in the most incredible one. The PSG one, we all thought, hey, PSG did it again. But this one, 2 goals in a minute by Rodrigo, and the way that the second goal happened. How on earth is Rodrigo hanging in the air? He's already into his heading motion, and Asensio gets a flick onto it. The slightest flick that takes it into the perfect path for Rodrigo's head to meet it and for it to go perfectly under the crossbar. It just reeks of the footballer guys just pulling strings from up there. I couldn't believe what I witnessed, especially as we said, there was nothing to indicate that this was going to happen. So I guess the point I want to touch on in terms of this is, what is the, I guess, cause and effect of a footballing narrative like this in football? Like, what comes first to the team? Because we've heard it for a while, especially after the PSG, and that's when this whole narrative started taking hold that, you know what, Real Madrid, the club, they've been here, they've done it, 13 times winners, the kings of Europe. If there's going to be a moment, it's going to happen in their favour. The 90th minute at the Bernabeu seems like 10 minutes. I mean, the narrative has just kept rolling on. So do you think, once the narrative took hold after that PSG game, do you think that the players really bought into it and now that's the effect of the narrative? Or do you think that the players are the ones who are pushing this narrative by their performance? I think it's got to be a bit of both, doesn't it?
You know, you talk about footballing gods, and I think like Florentino Perez is up there lobbying and bribing those gods to get his team over the line. In terms of narrative, man, half that squad has 4 Champions League titles in the past, like 6 or 7 years to their name. So they've been there, they've done that, and that's the core of the squad that has that experience behind them. And
well, let's not forget the manager who, in a really interesting one, Klopp made his 4th final to tie Ancelotti, and then Ancelotti the next morning just went and made his 5th to get the record back. So let's not forget he's been there and done this as well.
yeah, and it's interesting that it's Ancelotti against Liverpool again, just like it was in Istanbul back in 2005.
05-07.
Yeah, and against Liverpool once again in 07. At least he's 1-1 against the club. But yeah, there's just it seems like there's something poetic there, that it's Real Madrid and Liverpool. They're the 2 most winningest Champions League teams in history, aren't they?
No, I think Milan still have one more. I think they're on
They
7.
do? But
yeah, I think Bayern and Liverpool are on 6 each. Milan are on 7, and then it's Real.
But
I think it's 13.
you know what else though?
Yeah.
It's funny how was it last year or the year before that you had like Real Madrid pretty much. It seemed like Real Madrid, or at least Perez, was the most vocal about the whole European Super League. But his team is the one that's now creating like the biggest storyline in the Champions League, and also Liverpool were in that sort of mix of teams that were trying to form the league and stuff as well. So the two pretty much the two most winningest teams and the two teams that are now in the final as well. They're the ones creating this whole narrative, like Liverpool with the quadruple, and obviously Real Madrid with this really hard run to the final. And you know what else we can't forget? On match day 1, Real Madrid lost against
Sheriff.
against Sheriff as well at home, and they're in the
Okay,
final
well,
now.
and I don't think we'll talk about this later, but another thing that we can't forget, and I want to take it even further back, and it has to do with the other tie. Let's not forget the whole reason that Liverpool are in the Champions League is because Alisson scored a ridiculous diving header at West Brom in the last minute of that game.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. Like I forgot about that, but I know, like I remember that moment obviously, but yeah, like that on top of it, like if you want to go a little bit further, yeah, it's insane to think about it all.
And I guess as we look to the final, we're talking about narratives because we're in this section. I guess you could almost say that Liverpool have just as good a narrative at this time because they obviously have the Alisson moment that has been mentioned a few times these last few weeks, and then obviously the fact that they've already accomplished something almost historical. It's actually been done once before by another Liverpool team, but that is play every game that is available to be played in a season. They're now going to accomplish that, if nothing else, which is, I mean, I know that all of these trophies that are up for grabs could go against Liverpool and they could end up with no trophies. But just the fact that you played every game available, I think, is an incredible achievement in itself. Obviously, it'd be bitterly disappointing if they walk away with nothing, but I guess now you kind of have a narrative that can somewhat not match Real Madrid because they've generated so much momentum, and let's face it, they're not even the second best team. I mean, you walk away from all their ties, and this was the incredible thing that I was thinking about as well about Real Madrid and on this topic. If you're gonna think about the 540 minutes of football that has led them into the final, you could argue that Real Madrid were the better team for 15 against PSG, 30 against Chelsea, and then 2 or 5 against Man City. So literally, they have been the better team against the team that they've played for 50 minutes out of 540. And that is all it's taken for them to get all the way to the final. I think that's just an incredible thing to think about.
Well, that goes again. That's just backs up the whole narrative that, like, I guess possession doesn't win you games. Like the moments, the individuals is what gets you across the line.
Yeah, the moments, and you use that word for Real Madrid because this team is a moments team. That's all they need. I mean, if you want, so I thought we'd start on City because I thought City deserved to be started on because I don't think Real Madrid took this away from City. I'm not even sure City took it away from themselves, but you know how, like, when you start on the team that lost and you do the Inquisition, then everyone's like, oh, why aren't you giving the team that won the credit? I thought it was fair to start on City before Real Madrid because Real Madrid, like we say, they were good for maybe 5 minutes in that game, and they got everything done that they needed in those 5 minutes. But the rest of the game, they were pretty bang average. If you want to give credit, um, you could talk maybe about two things, and this one's an interesting one because I was talking about Edison before in terms of his distribution and how effortless he makes it look. But one thing you've really got to notice when you play Man City is defending their goal kicks. We talked about City, how good they are from set pieces, 18 goals in the league this season. But City take all their set pieces to the next level. And on a side note, an interesting thing that Real Madrid did you notice the set piece from the kickoff in the second half that led to that Vinny chance?
Was that at the very beginning of
At the very beginning, yeah, straight from kickoff.
I, I I
Yeah,
I remember that he missed the chance and everything, but like I can't remember
yeah,
the one or two passes before the chance.
yeah. Well, Real Madrid, that was very much a set play. And I believe I might have seen Real Madrid do this before, in fact. So now managers and coaches, probably coaches more so, are looking at even kickoffs as set plays. So I think that's something to maybe keep your eye out for a bit as well. But City have been doing this for years, ever since they got Edison, who's such a weapon from back there. You've got to defend their goal kicks properly because obviously Real Madrid with a goal deficit early in that game, they obviously wanted to maybe not all out press, but they wanted to press. But what that leaves you vulnerable to is Edison's range of passing is so broad and so accurate that you can often leave yourself vulnerable at the back. I've seen a lot of Premier League teams, particularly I think that Centurion season. Um, City would score a few goals from just Edison finding Aguero deep in the opposition half, and then they'd play off that because obviously you can't be offside from a goal kick. But I thought Real Madrid got the balance perfect off those goal kicks, and City really struggled to play out, and it led to City looking pretty average in the first half. So they applied at least a little bit of pressure in those scenarios, and more importantly, they got the balance right to not leave themselves open. I know Foden had that one half chance that Courtois got down to save pretty well, but apart from that, there was no real danger being created from City in that. And in a game where City wanted to stifle it and make it slow and stop start, you felt like that could maybe be an avenue, but Real Madrid closed that pretty well. And the other thing you've got to say, the substitutes, and we touched on City not being able to bring out any difference makers from their bench, but Real, I thought Rodrigo was definitely the most important player in terms of he came on and he scored those two goals. Benzema was probably second, and then third was probably Camavinga. And Camavinga was excellent when he came on, provided that energy in midfield. He made that driving run for to get the ball upfield for the penalty, I believe. So Real Madrid substitutes and Ancelotti substitutes worked a treat. I mean, obviously, once they bring off Modric, you're thinking, do they really believe they can win it? But I think it was Camavinga who came off for him, and he made a real difference. But I guess apart from that, I mean, Real Madrid, and we've said it, and so ultimately they do deserve to be in the final. But in a footballing sense, and who the better team was, they 100% didn't deserve to win this tie, as they haven't deserved to win any of the other ties, really. If we look at it in the cold light of day.
Um, I think the Chelsea one is a bit debatable. Like
Yeah, that
that
was the only
one.
one I was thinking. To be fair,
Yeah,
because that first half an hour was, or the first half in general was excellent. Um, and then the second half was pretty even. But Chelsea played them off the park at the Bernabeu. There was only one moment for Real Madrid in the 90 minutes.
yeah, but I still think if you look at over the entire 180, I think it's more even. Whereas like yeah, this one, like the City one, and even the PSG one to an extent, like they should have been dead and buried. But what can you say when your core is made up of winners? This is what, and individuals that they're probably the best in their position. Um, you're gonna get results like this.
And it's interesting you talk about the winners because obviously these guys are winners. Uh, but it was interesting to contrast the. No, I want to do this. I want to do this in a minute because that will segue into the other semi-final perfectly. Just before we leave Real Madrid and this incredible achievement to get into the final. Oh, the other positive I wanted to mention as well for Madrid out of the game itself was the redemption for the fullbacks because I for one have been unconvinced by the fullbacks in this run to the final. I thought Carvajal's been suspect at the back, and I think Mendy's been suspect on the ball and at times defensively as well. But it's obviously Mendy who comes up with the clearance while the game's still 1-0 off the line. And then it's Carvajal who delivers the ball for the Rodrigo goal. So they got their redemption there. But the last point I wanted to touch on, and it relates to another massive club, one playing in the Premier League. But you look at the way Real Madrid have been able to get to the final after the story around Real Madrid at the start of the season was this will be a transition year. Camavinga will come into the team. Rodrigo will be in the starting 11. Kroos and Modric will be slowly weeded out. We're bringing back Ancelotti. I mean, he was our fourth choice manager. So no one really expected Real Madrid to be here. I think at the start of the season, you'd struggle to find anyone. I certainly did talk to anyone who thought Real Madrid were the strongest contenders for the Champions League. But I mean, if you look at it, they still had quality players. Yes, they were older, and this relates to Manchester United back in the Premier League. But they got a manager in who knew how to deal and knew how to work with those players. And look at the tune he's getting out of these players. When you have a group of professionals and you have a group of winners, like you say, you can give them freer reign and you can trust in their professionalism and you can trust in their desire to win to go out there and do that. And Ancelotti is not a tactical genius, not anymore anyway. He used to be innovative, but I don't think he's a genius. But he is a man management genius. Any star who's worked with Ancelotti, Ronaldo and Ibrahimovic are the first two that come straight to mind. Just talk about how much they love working with this guy because this guy understands how to get the best tune out of established star players. And he's repeated the trick again with Benzema now. And there's no doubt that Manchester United have enough stars in their team. They're not the same level stars as Real Madrid in terms of resume, obviously, but they do have one of the key pieces that was part of that Real Madrid team in Rafael Varane at the back. But they have all those star players as well. And I know the deal's already done. They've already got Ten Hag, but I just think for me it was a missed opportunity to go for a manager who was better suited working with the playing group that was there. Because football's funny, and if you've got enough quality there, it has this way of just producing something like this Real Madrid story that we've got this season. So I just thought that was maybe a missed opportunity for Manchester United. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I disagree with that. Like, if you look at before this season, like who they had in the team, they didn't seem professional. They didn't seem like winners. They didn't seem. They seemed like they were more players that were interested in their Instagram followers than in winning trophies. That's what the playing squad looked like to me. And the only two winners that they brought into the squad was Ronaldo and Varane. So I don't think Ancelotti would have got a tune out of them at all, to be honest. I disagree with that point about United.
It's a tricky one because he definitely would have got a tune out of Ronaldo, and Ronaldo was maybe definitely the most important signing they made.
Well,
Whether it was
Ronaldo,
the right.
yeah, but Ronaldo already has like what 20 out of in all competitions. He already has 20 goals to his name. Like you've gotten the most, the biggest tune that you could have got out of
Okay,
him with
but
the players around him.
and here's the difference, and here's what I want to say. Benzema's been absolutely brilliant in a footballing sense. But the thing that Benzema has been absolutely fantastic in and why his team are in the Champions League final now is because of the leadership he has demonstrated this season. And if Ancelotti was around Ronaldo, I'm quite convinced that not only would he have got a good tune out of him footballing wise because it's Cristiano Ronaldo and he can still do that even at his age, but he would have got a tune out of him in terms of the leadership. And I didn't see that out of Ronaldo this season. He was too pouty, he was too stroppy. There's no doubt not a fan of Ranić. I think you just look at the body language between the two. Whereas if that was at Ancelotti, I think you see a more engaged Cristiano Ronaldo. I think he's pushing his teammates to do even better, and especially because I think that was the way he wanted to come back when he first came back under Solskjaer. But then I think things got a little bit hard, and he started to let go of the rope a little bit, and the rest started to let go of the rope a little bit. I don't think that happens under Ancelotti because I think he holds these, and I absolutely agree with you that this level of Manchester United player are definitely not winners to the level that the Real Madrid players are, but they're still star players. Paul Pogba's won a World Cup. I know Bruno Fernandes hasn't won anything, but he was the driving force last season. Now he's perceived as a star, or he was going into the season. So I just think that a manager like Ancelotti would have gelled better with the personalities he had. I think Solskjaer was somewhat gelling, but Solskjaer's problem, I think, is a lack of knowledge. I think the players, when the going gets tough, how much can you respect a manager who hasn't been there and done that? Whereas when the going gets tough, if I look at my manager and that's Carlo Ancelotti, and I'm a perceived star, and I'm trusted to do my job in the way that I'm meant to do my job by my manager, I don't think that Man United team lets go of the rope. It's all conjecture, and I could be wrong, but I definitely agree with your point about the winners, but I, I, I wouldn't disagree. I just think that was the way they should have gone with the next managerial appointment.
I I I personally think that they would have seen something similar to Ancelotti at Everton. That's what you would have gotten, because like it's not enough to have just Varane and Ronaldo. Pogba is he's not a serious. To me, he doesn't come off as a serious enough player to be the leader of the team. De Gea
But
is De Gea's too
he doesn't
far
need
in
to be.
goal to have any influence as well.
Well, Pogba doesn't need to be a leader, but what I see of him with the French national team, especially on that en route to winning that World Cup, he was right up there in terms of one of the leaders of that team. I thought. So I'm in no doubt that this guy can do it, and I don't think he'll be doing it at Manchester United. I think that's pretty clear. But I don't know. I think we disagree a little bit on that one, but I don't know. Real Madrid were going into this season not completely dysfunctional, but Manchester United going into the season weren't completely dysfunctional. They thought they finished second last season. They brought in star names that they thought would propel them to the next level. Real Madrid, who did they really bring in? They were bringing in youngsters, like we said, like your Camavingas, and Rodrigo was already there, I believe, but trying to bring those players through. So I don't know. That's just the power of what a good managerial appointment could do. And granted, it was their fourth choice, so it just all sort of aligned. That's another thing you can add to that Real Madrid narrative. But the thing that I wanted to touch on that will transition into the next semi-final was you looked at the end and you saw the contrast, I believe, and granted, they came through what was a more dramatic tie, although the Liverpool Villarreal tie was pretty dramatic in its own right. Um, but the Real Madrid players, they stayed on the pitch for a long time to lap up the adoration of the fans and whatnot. So that's fine. That's rightly so. But if you could contrast that to the Liverpool game, Liverpool were very much business as usual. It almost looks like they beat Burnley on a Wednesday night. Honestly, there was very little from the Liverpool players, and I don't know. Do you think that has a factor on the mindset of these two teams going into the final?
It might also be that probably comes down to the mentality of the coaches as well. Like you have like a German coach who, and like I guess the stereotype with Germans is that they're very serious, they're very efficient and productive and all that stuff, and they take everything, 100% serious. Whereas I guess like Italian and Spanish coaches, and even like I guess French coaches, they're more laissez-faire. They're a little bit more laid back. They're not as hard on I guess on they're hard on the work ethic, but in a different sense. Like they know that after the game you can have like a night to relax or something like that, or enjoy the moment. Um,
Yeah, but if you look at these two managers in isolation, you'd say that Klopp fits your second description better, and Ancelotti actually fits your first description better because Ancelotti wasn't one of the ones going nuts. Even when they were scoring the goals, he was just sort of his players were running up to him. But Klopp after games is infamous for his celebration. So I don't know.
yeah,
I thought that was an interesting contrast.
yeah, but like although like you do, like you're talking about the manager himself, but he might allow his players to be like that, whereas he himself isn't. So
Yeah,
that's
no
that's
doubt Ancelotti
yeah.
allows his players to express themselves. No doubt.
Yeah, so that's like my only, I guess, rebuttal to that, like, to that point. But like, you also heard, like it's not really, I guess, a celebration sort of thing. But like I've heard stories like where Klopp does obviously allow his players to have that moment to soak up and everything. But like where you mentioned, like on the field, it was different scenes. But I guess when you're down 2 goals in the 89th minute, you're pretty much knocked out. I think there was even a screenshot of a stat. You know those Opta stats, where it says like the predictability of the game. I think it was like a 1% chance for Real Madrid to win it before they scored
And
that
that's
goal.
generous.
Yeah, so
That felt generous.
so I guess in one sense, like where you have a team like pretty much steal it at the death with 2 goals to take it to extra time. It's gonna stir up different emotions as well.
Yeah, and it's obviously that circumstance. It's the fact that Liverpool are away and Real Madrid are at home in their second legs. But I thought you could also look at it and think that it was also a reflection of where the clubs are at and what it kind of means to be in the final. Because I think for Real Madrid, they've obviously won the league title. What it means for Real Madrid to cap off this improbable run with a final appearance and maybe possibly the trophy itself. I just think the way they celebrated showed you kind of how improbable it was. Because if that was the treble winning Real Madrid, no doubt they'd still be celebrating the way they went through. I think there'd be a bit more focus if you had that team together like that. Whereas Liverpool, I think, are now in that place where they're probably now perceived to be the best team in the world. Um, I don't know if City winning the league title, if and when they do win the league title, wrestles that back. It depends how, I guess, Liverpool perform in these finals. But Liverpool are in that place where they're the ones who, I mean, I guess they were playing Villarreal, but they were expected to go to the final. And thus the celebrations are muted. I have no doubt that once they got into the change room and it sort of sunk in that they'd be playing in their third Champions League final in 5 years, which is in itself an incredible stat as well. I have no doubt they would have celebrated, but I think it was a good indicator of what the runs meant to these different clubs. Because Real Madrid, it meant everything, and it was so improbable, and you could see that in the reactions. Whereas Liverpool definitely looked like they expected to be there, and in the game itself, I guess you could see that in the second half. What were your thoughts on the game? I guess we should go into that a little bit now.
So I spoke about it with our good friend Matthias a little bit, and me and him obviously disagreed with how we saw the game, and particularly the second half, because the first half reminded me a lot about how Liverpool took the game to Villarreal, and they didn't allow Villarreal to play in the first leg, where you had 2 or 3 players always pressing the player on the ball, cutting off passing lanes, not allowing the team to breathe, misplacing passes, not being able to control it. And that's what you saw from Villarreal like in the first half of the second leg. You saw them hunting in packs. You saw a stifled Liverpool, a nervous Liverpool, and they, in my opinion, they were let off the hook in the second half because I didn't see any great change from Liverpool in the way that they played. I saw a much bigger change, or a much more noticeable change, in how Villarreal played. Villarreal decided to sit, 5 or 10 yards deeper in their own half. They decided to employ that low block. They wanted to then play on the counter instead of on the front foot and pressing. And for the first time in the game, I saw Alexander-Arnold and Robertson playing on the edge of the opposition box, and then in the lead up to the first goal, I think Trent put in about 3 or 4 crosses, like they were asking the defense questions, and I didn't see that at all in the first half. So, in my opinion, I saw Emery get his tactics wrong, and I'm going to say tactics wrong rather than, the team were tired, because they had 15 minutes to rest. So, and from minute 45 in the second half, you saw a change of tactics. You didn't see Liverpool really press them and hunt in packs the way that they did in the first leg. That's why I'm saying I didn't see a big change in Liverpool's mentality. I saw Villarreal ease off and allowed them time and space on the ball, which allowed them to gain control of the game, rather than Liverpool enforcing themselves upon Villarreal and taking control back from them. And it was a massive, I believe, tactical mistake from Emery. And I watched one of the AFTV podcasts, and one of the guys said that you saw the same sort of mentality by Emery at Arsenal, where you'd go up, like you'd hunt in those sort of packs to regain possession of the ball and to play on the front foot, and you'd get 1 goal or 2 goals, and then Emery would decide for the team to sit back, and that's when you would invite pressure on the team. And then that's when you'd start conceding goals. So that's how I saw the game play out. Matthias, I'm not sure if you agree with Matthias or myself, or if you're somewhere in between, but Matthias believed that it was Klopp changing things and telling his team to calm down and take their time. But I believe that they were allowed to take their time on the ball. I'm not sure if I've really, maybe as you go on, maybe I'll have more to add to that, or have a different opinion on some of the things that you have to say, but that's my first initial thoughts on how I thought the game played out.
Yeah, so I think I stand somewhere in between. So first of all, I think Liverpool were somewhat let off the hook, but not for the same reasons as you state. I thought, and let off the hook might not be the right word, but I've already said this after the Inter game in particular, where the Inter tie away from home, I believe the first half was pretty even, and then Inter had a spell in the second half where they really asserted themselves on the game, much in the same way that Villarreal did in the first half. I thought Villarreal did it to a better level, and they did it for longer, because Inter only did it for about 20 minutes of that first half. But what happens, and we've seen it time and time again, Benfica, in fact, did it in the away leg as well. They had their spell at the start of the second half. After that, I think they were 2-0 down in the first half, but then they had their spell, got their goal, and it looked like they'd equalised for a long time. What we keep seeing with these teams who outplay Liverpool for these periods, it's unsustainable. They can't match Liverpool's intensity. So the way that Liverpool were let off the hook was by the fact that, and they weren't let off the hook because they're just fitter than pretty much every team. But Villarreal could not maintain it. I know you say they had 15 minutes, and they started the second half reasonably brightly. They wanted to press. Obviously, they didn't want to go as gung-ho as the first half. because now they were back in a level position. I mean, I think it would be a bit foolish, especially when you expect a reaction from Liverpool. But I thought I thought Emery obviously eased off a little bit, but I believe he had to because those players gave everything for 45 minutes. They had to play at their absolute maximum. And they did it for 45 minutes and they made Liverpool. You know, the funny thing is, we were talking about how some idiots on the radio in the UK were talking about how Villarreal were a disgrace. Liverpool were an absolute disgrace in that first half. They looked like a League Two side going into El Madrigal. They could not string two passes together. They could not get tight on the ball. They could not match Villarreal's work rate just by running. They were outplayed in every aspect in the first half. They did not get close to the game. They were in a different solar system to where the football match was being played. That's how much Villarreal were just on a different level in that first half, and Liverpool were terrible, and it looked like they were a bit shell shocked, to be quite honest. But you know what? Even watching the game, and I'm one of the more nervous Liverpool supporters you could get. I was worried because obviously the game was back to a level state, but I wasn't that worried because another point of why I don't think they were let off the hook by Emery is we've seen this. We saw it at the Etihad just about a month ago. Liverpool were pretty ordinary in that first half at the Etihad as well in the league game. And then second half, they came out and they started firing. Klopp has this effect. Klopp seems to have the magic touch when it comes to half times after his team hasn't been playing well. And so I think that fed into it. While I agree with you, not much changed, the intensity definitely changed. The concentration levels definitely changed. They were now starting to ping the ball in one touch and two touch. And you could just see that they went to a different level in the second half. And that coupled with Emery maybe easing off a little bit and the Villarreal players being absolutely knackered after giving the 45 minutes of their lives, I think ultimately Liverpool's fitness, which is part of class, just showed in the end. And that second half became very, very routine. But obviously they had to have a slice of luck with the goalkeeping error from Fabinho's strike. So who knows? It could have been a different night anyway. But I just think that this is all part of what makes Liverpool so good, to be quite honest. I think that fitness level and that ability to shift gears once you know you've had such a bad first half to just go to a different level. I think it's the reason why this team is in the Champions League final for, like we say, the third time in 5 years, rather than Villarreal, because I just think Villarreal had to put so much into that 45 minutes. And when we've seen it in the previous two away legs in the round of 16 and the quarterfinal, and we've seen the effect that Klopp can have at half time, that's why I lean more to these are just reasons why Liverpool are, for me, the best team in the world at the moment.
I still disagree with that point because I would agree with it more, especially with the energy levels, if Villarreal came out the same way they did in the first half for at least 5 or 10 or even 15 minutes and then eased off. That's my main point about that, or my main argument about that point.
I think they did try. I don't think
they did.
Went back onto the edge of their box by design. I think for the first, before Liverpool scored, in fact, there was maybe 5 minutes before Liverpool scored where Liverpool were the better team. But for the first 10 minutes before that in the second half, I thought the game was still pretty even. And I don't think Villarreal, while it wasn't the first half, it could never be the first half because they put in so much into that first half.
I still disagree with that because, like I said, they had that 15-minute rest. They can get their energy levels back. They obviously have like some of the they have like they don't have the best physios, but they have like some of like they have the top 1% physios in this at this level of football in the world. I still disagree with that point because I didn't see some massive lift by Liverpool. I honestly did not see it. I saw like even bringing Diaz on, it didn't like yes it was a change, but it didn't suddenly inject this massive burst of intensity or energy. Like it did ask problems. Maybe that was the change that made Liverpool, Villarreal have to sort of rethink things and go, oh hey mate, this guy's gonna ask a lot more questions than us of us. So maybe we should sit back another 5 yards. Otherwise, we could get hit even harder on the counter. But I honestly did not see some massive change, or even like a 10 or 15% change in intensity from Liverpool. I didn't see it. I can't agree with any of those points.
But you're looking at Liverpool in isolation, and you're expecting them to get to the maximum level that they can get to, and they didn't. They didn't need to in the second half because Villarreal had wiped themselves in the first half. And you talk about the 15 minutes you've got to rejuvenate. I don't know about you, but as a player, I hated halftime. I hated going in and sitting down and getting stiff and like getting tired in the dressing room and then coming out for the second half. If I had put in a first half like that, it would feel like the end of 90 minutes when I went in there. So unless I'm
See,
still on the move or something in there, I'm gonna feel sore and I'm gonna feel tired. I know they have great physios, but how long does that last going into the second half after they've just, like I say, really had the 45 minutes of their life
see,
because they were all over Liverpool.
see, with
But
the
Liverpool didn't need to get to 100% of what Liverpool can do in the second half because obviously Villarreal are depleted, and then Liverpool only need to. And the other aspect as well is when you're the team in possession, that intensity is harder to gauge. It's not like you're running faster and you're sprinting harder for every ball. It's that you're moving the ball quicker. It's that it's in one touch and that it's in two touch, and now you've got control of possession. The first half, they never had control of possession. But when they got their foot on the ball and the midfielders were able to dictate, because Villarreal dropped off a bit, because they were exhausted, because they had to put in so much just to get those 2 goals back, I just think it's at least 50-50 that Liverpool are just this good, that more than Villarreal dropped off that much.
I like just with the personal anecdote about the whole halftime thing. Personally, as a player, I always came out better in the second half because I needed that first half for my lungs to open up. Like that, I always found that personally as a player. So I guess and you obviously had the opposite sort of it had the opposite effect on you. So like I guess it depends on player to player. You're saying it's 50-50, but I still think that it was a tactical change from Emery rather than the players dropping off, because I don't even with Villarreal playing at that intensity that they played in the first half, they and we've seen this with other teams as well in other games. You can still play with that similar sort of intensity for at least another 15 or 20 minutes, and then you start to drop off. I saw that drop off immediately. I don't think they had 45 minutes in the tank. I honestly don't. These are professional footballers playing at the highest level. They don't have just 45 minutes in them. They have more. This was a tactical change and a tactical error.
They're not playing a normal 45 minutes. Did you see how much Villarreal had to run in that first half? Did you see how they had to close down every ball and make Liverpool look terrible? And Liverpool helped and abetted that because they were terrible. I think maybe complacency played a part. I think the fact that they weren't going to one of these cathedrals of European football in the second leg semi-final tie, and that they were just playing like little old Villarreal, who everyone expected them to beat, and they had a 2-goal lead. I think that meant that Liverpool's level was way below what it was. But then, and this is my point about, you expected Liverpool to raise to some crazy intensity that would see them playing the level that they would look to get to when they played Man City. They didn't need that. They just needed to get back to their normal. And that was their normal. It wasn't exceptional Liverpool in the second half. I totally agree with that. But it was normal Liverpool. And you look at the Villarreal players when they had to go in at half time. They were sweating and some of them were panting. You look at Kapui when he picks up his first yellow card, I think, early in that second half. He looked absolutely gassed. So I I definitely, because we're talking about elite, but we're talking about elite of elite. Villarreal are not the same as Liverpool, and that's just the fact. And that means into that goes fitness levels as well. I think and we've talked about it. In fact, we when we were talking about Benzema earlier, I think in one of our early pods, we were talking about he looks slim, he looks fit this season. I think when you get to that level, that athleticism and that ability to get your body into tip top shape is definitely one of the things that differentiates a player who plays at the team who finishes eighth and a player who plays at the team who finishes second in any given league. Because elite is elite is relative. So these, yes, Villarreal are in the semi-finals of the Champions League, but they're not on Liverpool's level. I think we can all accept that. So I think this was something. This was definitely a tie Liverpool should have gotten through, and they did get through. But it did also show that they are a different level to VRL, and that's what the second half showed. It wasn't. Yes, I think. Granted, maybe the game could play out differently if the goalkeeper doesn't make that mistake. But I mean, that first half, how many teams have you seen do that to Liverpool? There's a reason teams don't do that to Liverpool. It's because it takes that kind of effort. This was VRL fighting for their lives. They're not going to make champions. They're looking to only make it through this avenue. So they're not going to be back here. That group of players aren't going to be back here anytime soon. And on a side note, thank God it wasn't Francis Coquelin who was the hero for Villarreal in this game, because man, he was winding me up. All these managers who forgot about me and all of this, all the clubs who forgot about me, scores the goal. Come on, man, you ain't the star of this show. But I was very happy that he wasn't a player who got all his redemption and whatnot, because he's a bang average player, to be fair. But yeah, I guess we're going to disagree on that. But I think Liverpool are no doubt deserve a finalist. I think it would have taken something special for Villarreal to get through. They nearly had it, but as a Liverpool supporter, I'm pretty happy, A, not to lose the game, and B, to win the game from the position we were in.
We can agree with the over both legs that Liverpool are the more deserving finalists, but yeah, we're obviously going to disagree on. I guess that point about. I'm trying to find the right way to phrase it, but I guess
who caused the loss more, or who caused the win more?
Yeah, especially like I just can't get over the fact that there was just such a massive change in tactics from Villarreal's side from first half to second half. Because even when you look at the running stats, and I know that running stats is just distance covered, like in kilometers, it's not the type of running, because obviously sprints take out more from you than just like jogging and walking. But like Villarreal covered 110, almost 118 as a team, covered 111 kilometers, or just short of, and Liverpool's was 109. So it's only 2 kilometers more for the entire team. So it's like how much is that per player? Like 200 meters more per player that they've covered. So the whole fitness debate, I think, I personally think it's a nothing. It's a nothing burger, because it started from minute 45. It didn't start from minute 70 when like, I guess you can, like we've seen it in games where teams have their spells, and like we see it a lot in the Premier League where a team comes out all gung-ho for the first 15-20 minutes, and then they drop off, and then the other team has their ascendancy for the next 15 or 20 going into the half time. Like I said, we saw Villarreal sit deeper from the very beginning of the second half, and we saw Trent and Robertson get to the edge of their box. I think that was the first time I saw them cross the halfway line, because they were allowed to cross the halfway line. I don't think it was them pushing up and just forgetting their player. It was them being allowed that time and space, and the other players being allowed that time and space on the ball to play better passes, to take a touch, or to play in one touch, and be more calm on the ball. That's my contention, and I'm like, I know that, going deeper into our personalities, I know that I'm a more like once I have my point of view, I'm a stubborn person on that. But I know what I saw, and I didn't, and especially when I'm comparing it to how Liverpool played in the first half and how they play in other games as well. I didn't see them, and in the first, not just the first half, but in the first leg as well, I just didn't see that same sort of pressing and intensity in the second half. I saw them be more calm and try to outplay Villarreal. So that's my contention with how it was how it played out. That it was more Emery getting his tactics wrong rather than Klopp changing anything to get it right. I think
And I'm not,
Emery
and
opened
I'm
the
not,
door.
and I'm not arguing that Klopp changed anything to get it right. I'm just saying Liverpool played to at least their average. But if Villarreal were a team who could do this week after week, who could play at the intensity that they played at in the first half, who had the players, who had the fitness levels to be able to do that, then they would not be seventh or wherever the hell they are in La Liga. They'd be challenging for the title if they could do what they did in the first half. I mean, so I just think the fact that they played so much above their level just shows you how much they had to put into this game. But I guess that's my last point on that. But now we have another Spanish English affair to look at in the final, or look forward to in the final. Which honestly, thank God. I was thinking that during the City tie, because obviously the City Real tie, because that was the second one, the second game, and I was just thinking, I really hope it's not City. For one, I think they give us they I wouldn't say that they do give us more problems than Real Madrid in a footballing sense, but Real Madrid give us the problems of destiny and fate and all of that, and all that narrative that can play on your head. But in just a purely footballing sense, I just didn't want to watch Liverpool Man City again. I know it's been a fantastic game each time they've played each other, but I just wanted to watch a different game. And like you say, you're never thrilled when it's a final between two teams from the same country. Me neither. Even when you get drawn in the quarters or the semis against a team from the same country, it's never as fun. So I'm very happy that we get a contrast between Liverpool and Real Madrid in the final, and I think we're all hoping that it's going to be. I don't think Liverpool know any other way to play. To be quite honest, I think they're going to take the game to Real Madrid, and it'll be interesting to see the moments that Real Madrid can get in the game, but also the moments they allow for Liverpool, and whether they can withstand the pressure that Liverpool put on you. Because if we're talking about fitness, if they're going to go Casemiro, Kroos, and Modric, well, those guys, that midfield battle will be fascinating because those guys have the ability to control the game, no doubt. They have the experience, but do they have the legs and the calmness to deal? They definitely have the calmness, but just do they have the legs really to deal with not only Liverpool's midfield but the forwards counter press onto them as well? Um, it's a game where I think again, and I don't think there's any team in the world who I say are fitter than Liverpool. Maybe City come close, but it's a game again. I think that fitness matchup will help, but it's a one-off game in a final. So I don't know how you see what matchups you see being pivotal in the final, or just what you find interesting about this matchup that we've got.
My contention with this one was always that if City go through, they're gonna then win the final because I think that they have Liverpool's number, and if Real Madrid
They haven't beaten us this season, mate.
I know, but like besides the FA Cup game, which we've gone into, and the fact that it seemed like they fielded pretty much their second string team, they've looked better in the games that they've played.
I agree. In the league games, they were the more dominant team for longer periods of both games.
And also the fact that they lost that knockout game. I think that they then would have fixed things and gotten things right to then win the final. And also considering that they lost the final last year, they would have righted that wrong and gotten the win in the final. Now that it's Real Madrid, and like I said that if Real Madrid goes through, then Liverpool will beat them because they obviously have that on, like, it's pretty much that whole team that lost against Real Madrid a couple of years ago. Whereas that team from Real Madrid, like, I guess you still have that same core, but some of the players have left. Whereas it's pretty much the exact same Liverpool team. And they're going to want to right that wrong, but also not just that from a mentality point of view, but they also look... We've seen what Man City did in the first leg against Real Madrid, where they pressed and played at a super high intensity, and they just overran Real Madrid. They couldn't really deal with it. And Liverpool do that to a better efficiency, I think is the right word, or the right way of putting it. So they're more effective at doing it. So I'm not sure that if Real Madrid couldn't deal with Man City's press and intensity, I don't think that they'll be able to deal with Liverpool's.
It's interesting because I think Man City's press and transition game and counter press is more organised than Liverpool's, so it's a bit more stifling in my opinion. Whereas Liverpool's is maybe more intense, but it's a bit more disorganised. So players are maybe covering more ground than the City one, or not in as good a positions to cut off the pass out and make sure there's no counter attack. Liverpool's is very often, if you can beat that initial press on the ball after regaining it, then you've got a good chance of creating a good chance at the other end because you'll have a lot of space. Liverpool commit more to that initial press, and like we've said, they trust Van Dijk and Alisson to cover more ground and defend more than probably City trust their centre backs to do, and rightly so because Laporte is no Virgil van Dijk, and Diaz even had his troubles at the Bernabeu, but I guess that's a discussion for another day. But I think it's a good point, the fitness point, because I think it will definitely play into it. Another thing I also think is I'm almost a little bit disappointed that it's not a two-legged final. I think a two-legged final would be really fun to watch because then you get to watch Liverpool at Anfield and then you get to watch Real Madrid at the Bernabeu. Who knows what happens in those two crazy stadiums? Another interesting thing, you've got the two teams from these two countries, Spain and England, the two teams with the most pedigree. Really, the two best clubs from each of those countries, just because of the European Cup success. I know Barcelona and Man United fans are going to want to take gripe with that, but 14 is more than 5 and 6 is more than 3. So when it comes to European Cups, you can't argue that, and that's the most important competition for these European elite clubs. So in terms of like that sort of, if you want to call it the footballing god aspect or whatnot, I don't think maybe Real Madrid will have a bit of an advantage in terms of that, just with what they've done to be in the final. But honestly, in the footballing sense, and we've said this every step of the way a lot with these ties with Real Madrid, but in the footballing sense, I just see Liverpool being too strong. So again, I know it's getting to be boring analysis when we look into going into these games that involve Real Madrid, but can they capitalise on the moments? They left it very late against City. Benzema wasn't very good in that second leg either, it must be said, but he did score the crucial penalty. But if Benzema plays at the level he played in that second leg against City, I don't give Real much chance. But if he takes half chances, if he takes those bouncing balls, I think both teams are going to score. And it just depends if Real Madrid can take enough of those moments to win the game. Because apart from that, I think Liverpool will be the more dominant side in terms of the football that we'll see in the game. I might be completely wrong, but that's just how I see it from what I've seen this season from these two teams.
That the midfield battle is going to be interesting because you have Thiago, Fabinho, and I'm guessing Henderson's going to play, not Keita,
Mm.
against Cruz, Modric, and Casemiro. So that's going to be super interesting. And you mentioned how the forwards also press the midfield for Liverpool. That's going to be the most interesting battle for me because if Real Madrid can gain a football and they can keep possession of the ball and not lose it so cheaply, I think there is every chance that they can get ahead because you also think of the other battles that are going to occur, and will Trent get as much freedom on that right hand side against Vinicius? Will he be able to get past the halfway line to put crosses in? Will he be able to risk that against such a dangerous winger like Vinicius? Because Vinicius is a little bit more polished and a little bit more experienced because he's been playing a year or two longer than Martinelli. And Martinelli's getting him asked questions of him when a couple of weeks ago when Arsenal played against Liverpool. So that's going to be an interesting battle. And now with if Valverde still plays on the right hand side instead of Asensio or Rodrigo, is Robertson going to get that same freedom going forward as well? Because we've seen them push so high up that they're playing on the edge of the opposition box, and I'm not sure that they're going to be able to get that freedom, which will then give it takes two players sort of out of the game, I guess, and two very big attacking influences out of the game for Liverpool. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be the most interesting battle over the whole pitch because your fullbacks are so important for you.
I agree with both those points. I don't know which one's the more important, but that Trent Vinicius battle will be the more fascinating one out of the battles because I think Valverde should play, and I think Valverde will be asked to just do a job on Robertson and track his runs and make sure that he can't make those overlapping runs, make sure he can't carry the ball forward as well, because Liverpool like to use that as a weapon, definitely. Whereas on the other side, I think they'll just both be taking risks on each other. I think Vinicius, we've seen, isn't really has no defensive bones in his body. He doesn't really want to do the tracking back work. He doesn't want to run with Trent. But similarly, Trent is one of the weaker world class fullbacks we've seen in recent years. That's for sure. So that will be a give and take battle. I think it might hinge on who can do the more damage than the other in that particular battle. The whole game might, in fact. But I definitely think that they're going to get opportunities to do damage. Um, and the other point, the possession point, because I spoke about can the midfielders find that pass out of the press, but can they find that pass out of the press to also keep possession? Because if Real Madrid are able to if those midfielders can find the ball out of that press, but if it leads to them having to go forward and try and counter attack, sure they might create opportunities, but that leads it to being a game that Liverpool want to play where it's end to end and you can get a chance, but then if you don't score from it and we regain possession, we're going to go up the other end and exploit that space that you've now left. So whether Real Madrid can not only get out of the initial counter press and find the pass past that, but whether they can have prolonged moments in possession after that will be interesting to see as well, because Real Madrid will definitely want to have time on the ball and want to control the game with the midfield that they have. But a weakness, I think, is the fullbacks from Real Madrid. Neither of those fullbacks scare me on the ball. So Liverpool can now load up on the central areas. And if they do find a pass out to the fullbacks, well, fine, we'll get across and we'll press them. But we don't have to really be worried that they're bringing any weapons to the game. Whereas if Real Madrid had a fullback like Reece James or Trent Alexander-Arnold, then if the ball goes out wide to them, then alarm bells have to start ringing, and you can't load up on the middle because you've got to worry about the threat that they can give in possession. So if can Real Madrid get those prolonged periods in possession? Obviously, can they take their moments? And then that battle between Vinicius and Trent, I think really um, without going into it in too depth, without seeing, and I can't see it. They're the three keys, I think, to this match. Um, and also, if Real Madrid's back four come out as chaotic as they did against Man City at the Etihad, I know they were missing Casemiro, and he made a huge difference in that second half as well. Clogging up gaps, we saw exactly what he does for that midfield. So, but can Liverpool be a bit quicker into those spaces that the back four leave before Casemiro can plug them? That will also be interesting to see if they can be effective in those moments.
Just talking about these matchups, I think I'm more excited for this final than I would be than the other matchup, like the City Liverpool final. But because as we mentioned, we've already seen it before. But yeah, I think there's more questions. I think with this one.
Yeah, definitely, because we haven't seen it, and that's the point. And that's why I agree with you totally that this will be a more interesting final than the Liverpool City one that we were expecting going into the second legs. What do you think about the two-legged final? Would you be pro or anti?
Not if they're playing. Like, it's hard to then. Like, who would you give the second leg to? Like, do you give it to, because like it just doesn't seem fair to me. Like, if you give the second leg to either team, really, because you're playing in front of your home crowd, unless you give it 50-50 ticket allocation, rather than I think the standard is how much what's the standard? Is it like 10% to generally? Like 5,000 tickets or something generally, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so unless you give 50-50 in both legs, then it makes sense, but you're still playing, I guess, on your home ground. But yeah, it's just too big of an advantage to not be playing at a neutral venue, unless you play two legs at neutral venues.
Well, no, that defeats the whole purpose.
Well,
The
then...
reason I like them, yeah, no, I agree with your point about, and I've always thought this as well. When you get to the quarterfinals and the semifinals of the Champions League, that it's unfair if you have to play a second leg away from home because the other team didn't earn their second leg being at home. It's not like they finished like first in the group and then second like in the round of 16. This is just pure luck of the draw that you got your second leg at home and the other team didn't. So I get that point, but I just think like your fans have been with you the whole journey to get to the final. I just think it would be really good to see them rewarded by having an actual home game in the final. But I know that competitions don't do it. The last one I think to do it. Oh, I know the Asian Champions League and the North American, the CONCACAF Champions League. I'm pretty sure do two-legged finals. I'm pretty sure the Libertadores have moved away from two-legged finals, but I just think when your fans have been there for the whole time, to give them a measly 5 or 10% of the ticket allocation for the final is an absolute disgrace. And I just think it would be nice to see them rewarded with a home final. But having said that, I get your point that if second leg goes into extra time, then they've got an extra 30 minutes at home, and that's not really fair. So I don't know. It's a toss up, really. Which one do you prefer?
But it's not just that. Like, if the second leg goes to penalties as well, then like you have your home crowd right behind the goal of where the penalties are being taken as well. There's also that to consider. But yeah, like unless it's played at two neutral venues, I can't see any point of it. Or unless you give 50% allocation to the away crowd, then yeah, I don't. Then it's not fair in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, but you sometimes get, I guess, like that sort of home crowd, sort of a home crowd where I think was it the 2011 final that was at Wembley, so United sort of were at home, sort of, just because it was an English stadium, and I guess
you only have to go to the next season's final to get a legitimate home final. When Bayern played Chelsea at the Allianz.
Oh yeah, and they ended up losing that as well, didn't they?
Yeah.
But and was
Um,
was there was there a final at the Bernabeu that Real Madrid played at,
yeah, I
or
think that was the final of the Bernabeu was 2010. That was Bayern Inter.
and and everyone was
Because
expecting Barca to get through to that.
Barca, yeah, Barca wanted to win it at the Bernabeu,
Yeah,
but Inter had to fight it.
yeah. But yeah, for a one-legged final is fine for me.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, in an ideal world, you do the playoffs from our European Super League 2.0, one
Well,
leg each, home and away, and then if
and
we're
then
still
a
tied,
neutral.
then we'll go to the neutral. But that's just too many games now, definitely. But um, I think we've touched everything. It was all on the Champions League. I know I had a little United contrast to Real Madrid in the middle, but I did want to touch on Mbappe. Looks like he's re-signing with PSG, but I think we should leave that for a later pod because there's probably more that we can talk off around that. But the numbers that are being reported are absolutely ludicrous. I believe it's 50 million annual salary. I believe I heard it was 100 million sign-on fee for him. I mean, wow, the numbers are just ridiculous. But
Yeah,
if that
ridiculous.
turns, yeah, ridiculous. But if that turns out to be true, I'm sure we'll have a lot of conversation around that. So um, I'm happy to leave it there. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on, wanted to add?
Well, obviously we got a big game coming up this weekend in Liverpool Tottenham that I think is worth touching upon, and also we need to give props to Rangers and Frankfurt getting to the Europa League final as well.
Yeah, definitely. That West Ham Frankfurt game was killed with the red card and then a goal pretty soon after. Um, but when you beat Barcelona on your way, you've got to be deserved finalists. And Rangers, I think I can't remember if we talked about this on one of the pods, but the advantage of being able to play at Ibrox with fanatical fans to really push you on further. They beat the team that I expected to win at Leipzig out of the final four. And Cuckoo scored another goal. I think he's up to like 42 or something goal contributions this season, which is just insane. Be interesting to see where he goes. But yeah, definitely props. Rangers back in well, I think they made the UEFA Cup final in, I want to say, '08 at the City of Manchester Stadium, I think against Zenit, but they're back into a final. And Frankfurt, we already touched on their run, so fantastic achievement.
And
Um,
just a question: do you think if
yeah,
Gerrard stayed at Rangers, that they would have still got this result, or is that more Van Bronckhorst? Pro like is that more his hand? What do you think about that?
it's interesting.
And
I mean, we don't
how
know.
would that have played for his legacy as well? Because he stopped the 10 in a row by Celtic. He won obviously the title for Rangers. He sort of rebuilt that whole squad, that whole team, and then to follow it on and back it up with the European final and potentially European or the Europa League Cup. Like, how would that have played for his managerial legacy as well, especially being such a young manager?
I definitely would have given him an even stronger platform to go on and get a bigger, a better job. Maybe he could have got a bigger job than even Aston Villa. Gerrard definitely deserves a lot of credit for laying the foundation, but Van Bronckhorst also deserves a lot of credit for being the man in charge to actually take him through these ties. And obviously, they've had to get through Dortmund and Leipzig to get here. So it hasn't been an easy run by any means. So Rangers have a lot of good players. I don't. I'm pretty sure they were all there from the Gerrard days, but when I watch them play, I think the left centre back Bassi, he could probably play in the Premier League, maybe even at an Arsenal. I'm really impressed with him. He can also play left back. Um, and then Joe Aribo in the midfield. Ryan Kent, old Liverpool boys, pretty good player. They got Ramsey in for a bit. I think he got injured though. So Rangers are a good team. I think
Typical
Gerrard laid a
Ramsey.
lot of that. I think Gerrard laid a lot of foundation, but But again, Van Bronckhorst also deserves a lot of credit for being the man who's actually taken him there.
Yeah, and he's a sort of young manager as well, isn't he? Like, because he only finished his career like 10 or so years ago, didn't he?
Mm.
So it's definitely, I think that's good. That should be an interesting final as well. And I've watched a little bit of Frankfurt, especially like against Barca, and a little bit last night. I didn't watch the first leg, and they seem like a pretty decent team. Like they have some pretty dangerous players.
They're definitely a high energy team as
Yeah,
well.
very high energy, which I
Yeah,
like.
yeah, very very German.
Yeah,
Very direct, up and down, can run, can cover the spaces. Really, really functional team is what I would say about Frankfurt.
yeah, yeah.
So
And your
yeah, that'll be
thoughts? In your thoughts
oh, yeah, go on.
on the EPL game?
That's it's just another obstacle, the hardest obstacle left for Liverpool in the run in. Um, Obviously, you've got to be wary of what Conte can do against good teams. He's a master game planner. So it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with in this game. Obviously, Tottenham have those threats of Kane and Son. Kulusevski, if he's feeling on form as well, can be a threat. Son will have to watch running in behind Kane dropping into the spaces. So a really dangerous game for Liverpool, no doubt. Um, Also interesting, and I actually wanted to ask you this question before we went as well. But interesting to see what kind of tax or toll that the game in midweek took on Liverpool. I don't think it'll be too much. I think they've got a deep squad as well. And the good thing I'll say is Liverpool's football it's not completely, but it's almost game plan proof in the fact that they rely on just really high intensity to get things done. It's not so much we rely on this certain sort of movement. We rely on being able to play these neat 1-2s, but we're just going to ask questions of you and we're going to put pressure on you for as long as we can. It's just we're just going to play the best we can for as long as we can. We're not trying to outthink you necessarily. We're just going to outplay you, outrun you, outfight you. That's kind of what the essence of football is. So yes, there can be a game plan that Conte could come up with, but I don't see it quite going the same way as him coming up with a game plan like he did against Guardiola at the Etihad. Whereas City are a team that you can game plan for a little bit more, I think. I think Liverpool, you've almost just got to play the game and hope that they're not quite on it like they were at Villarreal, and then also take your chances. And Tottenham have two very good players who can certainly do that. But the question I wanted to ask you, uh, if you want to couple this with your thoughts on that match as well, but do you think that City getting knocked out, especially in the manner that they did in the Champions League, do you think it's going to have an effect on them, either positive or negative, going forward for the rest of the Premier League season?
I think it'll just be positive for the rest of the season. They have 4 games left, and now they can just concentrate solely on the Premier League. So I don't think it will have. I don't think it'll have any negative effect, to be honest. At least I don't expect it to, because they're a team they know how to navigate the Premier League now. Like they've won 3 or 4 out of the last 5 or 6 Premier Leagues or something along those lines. So they're quite experienced at that, and I think Pep should be good enough to get the players to bounce back and get a result this weekend, even after such a demoralising defeat. And just on your point about, I guess, how the midweek fixture could affect Liverpool, I don't think it will, because I've already said that I didn't see any sort of change in intensity or exertion from Liverpool against Villarreal, so I've already made my point about that. Not to sound like a broken record, but because I don't feel like they hit any sort of third or fourth gear and they didn't up their level. So, and they also had like they played on Tuesday, so they have that extra, like, I guess, day rest as opposed to playing on the Wednesday like they did last week, where they had to play on Wednesday and then play again on Saturday. So, and I think it's also a night game as well on Saturday. So they get that little bit of extra time rest. So I don't think there should be any issues in terms of fatigue. But yeah, like going back to City, I don't expect any drop. I don't expect any drop of form. But this is football, and I guess if anything is this week has taught us, expect the unexpected.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think it will be mainly positive, but this game coming up will be interesting because of the exertion they had to put in, going to extra time in Spain at the Bernabeu. And then we couple that with how perceivingly thin the squad is already. Walker had to come off in that game, and obviously that was his first game back in a while. And then obviously Cancelo played a whole 120 minutes. De Bruyne had to come off in that game. The two centre backs played a whole 120 minutes. So if there's a game that they might slip up, it could be this weekend after that. But similarly, if there's a game that Liverpool could slip up, I think it's this Tottenham one as well, even though they are at home. But the fact that it's Conte and the fact that Tottenham still have those two world-class players in their team leaves anything really a possibility in that game. So this could be a very interesting weekend in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's going to have massive ramifications for the top four spot as well, because I think also Arsenal are going away to Leeds. Or wait, are they at home to Leeds? I need to check that. So I don't get that. No, they're at home to Leeds. Okay, that should be obviously a game that they pick up points from. And like this, and if Tottenham lose and then Arsenal win, that's a 5-point gap, and that gives a little bit of leave room going into the North London derby as well, which we'll touch on next week. But I think this weekend, every Arsenal fan is actually going to be a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, and I'm obviously going to be a Liverpool fan, but I'll probably be a Leeds fan as well. Sorry. And I'm hoping we win, but I'm hoping that game next weekend means a lot. I hope that it's only 2 points the gap rather than 5 points. So I hope you both lose this weekend. Obviously, because I have to hope Tottenham lose because we're playing.
Well, then screw you. I hope that Tottenham beat you guys. And I hope you. And
it's counterproductive for you, mate.
No, it isn't. Not if we win.
Alright, I think before things get a bit more edgy, we should probably call it a night there or a morning for you. And Nev, again, been a pleasure. We got a little bit more tetchy in the middle there. That's good. Maybe the listeners like that bit of edginess in the middle, but again, it's been a pleasure talking about what we've witnessed in the Champions League. Another incredible night at the Bernabeu. Another night of Liverpool asserting their dominance, or Emery getting his tactics wrong.
Definitely the latter.
Out there. But Nev, it's been fun, and I'll talk to you again soon to talk about what we saw over the weekend.
Definitely looking forward to an exciting weekend, and yeah, talking about it next week.
Thanks, man. All right, take care, guys. Bye.